The transport ship docked with Station Vex Prime at 0800 hours. Ji-woo pressed her hand against the cold window, watching the massive station grow larger as they approached. It was beautiful in a way that made her chest tight. Gleaming towers spiraled outward from a central hub, each one housing warriors from different worlds. Lights blinked across its surface like stars. She was the only human on the transport. The other passengers were tall, scaled creatures with 4 arms, or floating beings that glowed with soft blue light, or insectoid warriors whose shells clicked when they moved. They barely looked at her. She was small compared to most of them, standing only 5.5 feet tall. Her black hair was tied back in a simple bun. Her uniform was standard issue, nothing special. The station was home to over 10,000 students. Warriors from 47 different species came here to learn combat techniques that had been perfected over millions of years. The Galactic Coalition had been at peace for 300 years. Real war was something from history books now. Combat training had become tradition, ceremony, a way to honor ancestors who had fought in ancient times. Ji-woo shouldered her small pack and followed the other recruits off the transport. The docking bay was enormous. Ships of every size and design lined the walls. The air smelled strange, filtered, and recycled, with hints of chemicals she couldn't name. Gravity felt slightly wrong, just a bit lighter than Earth normal. A tall being waited at the entrance. It stood nearly 8 feet high, with a body covered in dark green chitin plates. 4 arms hung at its sides, each ending in 3-fingered claws. Its head was triangular, with large compound eyes that reflected rainbow colors. 2 mandibles framed a mouth full of sharp teeth. This was Instructor Krelvith, a Mantix warrior. He looked down at Ji-woo with what might have been curiosity or contempt. It was hard to tell with alien faces. Lieutenant Ji-woo. Human. His voice came through a translator device on his chest. It made his words sound flat and mechanical. You are assigned to Advanced Weapons Program, Barracks Level 7, Section 12. Follow the others. She nodded. Yes, Instructor. The next 3 days were orientation. Ji-woo learned the station layout, the schedule, the rules. She met her bunkmates, 2 Draxian females with red scales and retractable claws, and a Quellan who communicated through color changes in its skin. They were polite but distant. Everyone was curious about the human, but no one seemed impressed. On the 4th day, real training began. The weapons hall was a vast circular chamber with a domed ceiling that displayed a projection of space. 200 students stood in neat rows, arranged by species and size. Ji-woo stood in the back with the smaller beings. Instructor Krelvith stood at the center on a raised platform. Today begins the Rite of Blades, his translated voice boomed. Each warrior in the coalition carries a weapon that represents their culture, their history, their honor. You will present your weapon. You will speak its story. You will show that you understand what it means to be a warrior. One by one, students stepped forward. A Draxian male showed plasma talents that had been passed down through 15 generations of his family. The metal glowed with contained energy. He spoke of his ancestors who have fought in the Unification Wars 5,000 years ago. A Quellan displayed crystalline spears that hummed with psionic energy. The spears could be controlled with thought alone, striking enemies from across a battlefield. The Quellan's skin rippled with proud purple and gold, colors as it described ceremonies where these weapons were blessed. A massive Thurian, built like a living tank with thick gray skin, presented a hammer the size of Ji-woo's entire body. The hammerhead was carved from a meteorite core. The Thurian explained that his people forged their weapons from the hearts of dead stars. The presentations continued. Each weapon was more impressive than the last. Advanced technology, ancient magic, materials from exotic planets. The students watched with appreciation. nodding or making sounds of respect in their various languages. Finally, Krelvath's eyes fixed on Ji-woo. "Human, step forward." She walked to the center of the platform. 200 pairs of eyes, in every color and shape imaginable, watched her. She could feel their judgment. She was so small, so plain, so primitive compared to them. Ji-woo reached into her pack and pulled out a cloth-wrapped bundle. It was maybe 14 inches long, thin, unremarkable. She carefully unwrapped the cloth. In her hands lay a combat knife. The blade was about 12 inches long, made of dark metal that didn't shine much under the lights. The handle was wrapped in worn leather, darkened with age and use. The crossguard was simple steel. There was no glow, no hum, no special effects. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Not cruel laughter exactly, but amused, confused. A Draxian muttered something that the translator rendered as primitive. A floating Vex made a sound like wind chimes, which apparently meant the same thing in its language. Krelvath reached down with one clawed hand. "This is your ancestral weapon? A simple blade?" "Yes, Instructor," Ji-woo said quietly. The Instructor picked up the knife, turning it in his claws. The laughter began to fade. His compound eyes focused on the blade's surface. His mandibles stopped clicking. His other 3 hands reached out, and he activated a neural scanner built into his wrist. The knife appeared on the holographic display above them. Magnified 100 times, the laughter died completely. The blade's surface wasn't smooth. It was covered in marks. Thousands and thousands of tiny scratches, etchings, symbols. They covered every millimeter of the metal, layered on top of each other, old marks beneath newer ones. Some were crude, barely visible. Others were precise, made with laser tools. They formed patterns, words, numbers, names. Krelvath's translator made a sound like static. When his voice came again, it was different, quieter. What is this?" Ji-woo looked up at the magnified image of her blade. "That is my family's history, Instructor. 3 generations of war. Each mark tells a story. Each scratch is a memory. Each name is someone who died." The Instructor's claws trembled slightly. "Explain." She took the knife back from him, holding it carefully. "This blade was made by my great-great-grandfather 138 years ago. His name was Do-yun. He was 17 years old when he forged it from scrap metal in a bunker beneath a burning city." Ji-woo pointed to the oldest marks near the handle. They were rough, uneven, made by hand with another sharp object. "These are tally marks. Each line represents 1 day of survival during the first resource wars. See how they're grouped in 5s? That's 1 week. There are 208 groups here." She met Krelvath's eyes. 4 years of war. 13 billion humans fighting each other over water and food. The Korean peninsula, where my ancestors lived, had 80 million people before the war. 3 million survived. A reptilian student named Vex spoke up. "You're saying your species reduced its own population by billions?" 6 billion died in the resource wars, Ji-woo said. Her voice didn't shake. "We had no shields, no energy weapons, no way to leave the planet. Just explosives and bullets and nuclear bombs. We fought ourselves to the edge of extinction. My great-great-grandfather survived by hiding underground, eating rats, drinking contaminated water. He used this knife to fight, to hunt, to dig through rubble, looking for other survivors. The blade broke twice. He reforged it both times." The chamber was absolutely silent now. Even the translator devices seemed to hold their breath. Ji-woo traced her finger along the next section of marks. "These are more recent, made with laser engraving tools. These are from my great-grandfather, Tae-yang. He added his own story to the blade 30 years after the resource wars ended." Krelvath leaned closer to the holographic display. There are names here. Hundreds of names. 23 names, Jiwoo corrected softly. His squad. They died in the solar civil war between Earth and the Mars colonies. 8 years of fighting in space, on moons, on asteroids. Taeyang was the only one who came home. She looked around at the other students. This blade isn't special because of what it's made from. It's special because it survived. Because my family survived. Because we keep adding to it, keep remembering, keep carrying it forward. Our fingers moved to the newest section of marks. These were sharp, precise, made with nano-engraving tools. And these are mine. The silence grew heavier. These marks are from the war that ended 14 years ago, Jiwoo said. The war your coalition helped us win. The war against the Vryn Swarm. Fear moved through the room like a wave. The Vryn Swarm. Even students who had never seen war knew that name from history lessons. The nightmare species that had almost destroyed the galaxy 8,000 years ago. Jiwoo held up the knife so everyone could see it clearly. This blade has killed for resources, for freedom, for survival. 3 generations have carried it through hell. Every scratch is a life, every mark is a battle, every name is someone we lost. This is what it means to be human. We don't give up. We don't surrender. We survive. Krelvath stared at the blade for a long moment. Then he looked at Jiwoo with what she now recognized as respect. Class dismissed, he said quietly. Everyone except Jiwoo. The other students filed out of the weapons hall slowly. They kept looking back at Jiwoo and her knife. Whispers filled the air in dozens of alien languages. The translator devices struggled to keep up with all the conversations happening at once. When the last student left, Krelvath descended from his platform. His forearms moved in a gesture that might have been an invitation to sit. Jiwoo remained standing. The instructor settled his large body onto a bench designed for beings much bigger than humans. Tell me about the first marks, he said. His mandibles clicked softly. Tell me about Doyeon. Jiwoo sat cross-legged on the floor, the knife resting across her knees. She ran her thumb along the oldest scratches. They were so worn now that she could barely feel them. But she knew they were there. She had traced them 1,000 times. The year was 2087, she began. Earth's population had reached 13 billion. We had burned through most of our fossil fuels. The climate was collapsing. Ocean levels rose and swallowed coastal cities. Farmland turned to desert. Rivers dried up. Nations that had been allies for decades started fighting over what remained. Krelvath listened without interrupting. His compound eyes reflected the holographic display that still showed the knife's surface. Korea was divided into 3 territories by then, Jiwoo continued, each controlled by different corporate governments. My great-great-grandfather lived in Seoul Sector, the Southern Territory. He worked in a water filtration plant. He was 17 years old. He had never held a weapon before the war started. She pointed to a spot on the blade near the hilt. The fighting began on March 14th, not with a declaration or a warning. Just explosions. The Northern Territory attacked 3 water processing facilities in one night. Thousands died in the first hour. Do-yoon was working a night shift. He survived because he was deep underground when the bombs hit. Krelvath made a sound like grinding stones. Your people fought over water? We fought over everything, Jiwoo said. Water, food, fuel, land. Things you probably take for granted. Things we were running out of. She described how Do-yoon climbed out of the destroyed facility to find Seoul burning. The air was thick with smoke and ash. Buildings that had stood for centuries were rubble. The streets were full of bodies. He walked for 3 days before he found other survivors. They were hiding in old subway tunnels beneath the city, Jiwoo said. About 40 people at first. They had some food, some water, weapons taken from dead soldiers. They survived by staying underground during the day and scavenging at night. The survivors formed a group. They learned to move silently through the ruins. They learned which buildings were safe to enter and which ones would collapse. They learned how to filter dirty water and cook rats over small fires that wouldn't give away their position. Dayan found metal scraps in a collapsed factory, Jiwoo explained. Steel from old machines. He had watched his father, a metalworker, forge tools when he was young. So he built a small furnace in the tunnels. It took him 3 weeks to forge this blade. It wasn't pretty, but it was sharp. It was strong. She held up the knife so Krelvath could see the slight irregularities in the metal. Places where it had been bent and straightened. Places where different pieces had been welded together. He made it because he needed a tool that could do everything, Jiwoo said. Cut rope, open cans, pry open doors, defend himself. In that war, a good knife meant the difference between living and dying. The first tally mark appeared 6 weeks into the war. Dohyun scratched it into the blade with a piece of broken glass. 1 day survived. Then another mark the next day. And another. It became a ritual for him. Every evening, if he was still alive, he added a mark. The group grew, Jiwoo said. More survivors found the tunnels. At its peak, there were 200 people living underground. They set up watches, organized scavenging runs, tried to stay alive one more day. But the war above got worse. The 3 territories weren't just fighting each other anymore. Internal factions formed. Corporate militias fought government armies. Criminal gangs took control of entire districts. Anyone with a weapon became a soldier. Anyone with food became a target. Dohyun had to fight, Jiwoo said quietly. Not because he wanted to, because there was no choice. Other groups tried to take their tunnels, their supplies. They would kill everyone to get what they needed. Krelvath leaned forward. How old was he? 18 by then, 19, 20. Jiwoo traced the tally marks. Time stopped meaning much. Just day and night. Alive and dead. He used this knife in close combat when bullets ran out. He used it to cut through rubble, to save people trapped in collapsed buildings. He used it to hunt the rats that lived in the sewers. She described battles fought in pitch darkness, the only light coming from fires burning above. Fighting in knee-deep water with chemical waste that burned skin. Watching friends die from infections because there were no antibiotics. Watching children starve because there wasn't enough food. The blade broke the first time during the 2nd year, Jiwoo said. He was digging through a collapsed section of tunnel, trying to reach people trapped on the other side. The metal snapped. He thought that was it, that his luck had run out. But Dohyun had found a piece of titanium in a wrecked aircraft. He reforged the blade, making it stronger. The second break came a year later during a fight with raiders. A bullet hit the blade and cracked it lengthwise. Again, he repaired it, adding steel from a car axle. Each time he reforged it, the blade became different, Jiwoo said. It's not one piece of metal anymore. It's dozens of pieces, melted together, hammered into shape. Just like the survivors. Broken people put back together. The war lasted 4 years. 4 years of living underground like animals. 4 years of constant fear. 4 years of watching the world burn. When it finally ended, it wasn't because anyone won, Jiwoo said. It was because everyone lost. The 3 territories were gone, collapsed. The corporate governments had destroyed themselves. The militias had killed each other. Of the 80 million people who lived in Korea before the war, only 3 million survived. Krelvath's mandibles trembled. 3 million. Global casualties were 6 billion. Ji-woo added. Almost half of humanity died in 4 years. Not from some alien invasion or natural disaster. From ourselves. From our own greed and fear and stupidity. She looked down at the tally marks. 208 groups of 5. 1,040 days. Nearly 3 years of marks before they stopped. The blade had blank space after that. Smooth metal with no scratches. Dalton stopped counting when the war ended, Ji-woo said. He climbed out of the tunnels and saw the sun for the first time in months. The survivors came together, maybe 500 of them from different groups. They stood in the ruins of Seoul and didn't know what to do. Everything was gone. Their city, their country, their world. But they didn't give up. They started clearing rubble, planting gardens in the ash, purifying water from contaminated sources, building shelters from scrap. It took 10 years just to make the city livable again. 20 years to rebuild something like civilization. Da-hyun kept the knife his whole life, Ji-woo said. He taught his children about the war, not because he was proud of it. He hated what he had done, what he had seen, what he had become. But he wanted them to remember what humanity could sink to remember that survival required sacrifice. She met Krelvath's eyes. When he died at 73, he gave the knife to his son with one instruction. Never forget the cost of war. Never forget that peace is fragile. Never forget that we almost destroyed ourselves. Krelvath stood slowly, his forearms hanging at his sides. Your great-great-grandfather survived what should have been extinction. He carried that blade through hell. And then he made sure the memory survived too. Yes, Ji-woo said, because forgetting would be worse than dying. If we forget what we're capable of, we might do it again. The instructor looked at the holographic display showing the knife's surface. And the other sections? The other marks? Ji-woo stood, sliding the knife back into its sheath. Those are other stories. Other wars. Other survivors. My family seems to have a talent for living through impossible things. Show me, Krelva said. Tell me the rest. So she did. Ji-woo turned the knife over in her hands, revealing the second section of marks. These were different from Do-hyun's crude scratches. They were precise, made with laser engraving tools. Names, dates, coordinates. Each etching was tiny but perfectly readable. 30 years passed after the resource wars, she said. Humanity rebuilt. We developed fusion power, vertical farms, atmospheric processors. The population grew back to 9 billion. Earth healed slowly. We formed a world government, fragile but functional. For a generation, we had peace. Krelvath settled back onto his bench. And then? Then we looked up, Ji-woo said simply. We had fixed Earth, but it was crowded. Resources were stable, but limited. So we went to the stars. Not with FTL drives, like you have. We didn't have that technology yet. Just fusion rockets and generation ships. It took years to reach Mars. Decades to reach Jupiter's moons. She described the Great Expansion. Colonies on Mars grew into cities housing millions. Europa Station mined ice from beneath frozen oceans. Titan Base harvested methane from orange skies. The asteroid belt became a network of mining stations pulling metals from ancient rocks. Saturn's rings held research facilities studying phenomena Earth-based scientists could only dream of. My great-grandfather Taeyang was born on Mars, Ji-woo said. An Olympus colony built in the shadow of the solar system's largest volcano. He never saw Earth until he was 30 years old. To him, Mars was home. The red soil, the low gravity, the domed cities. That was normal. The colonies prospered for 20 years. They sent resources back to Earth. Metals, water ice, helium-3 for fusion reactors. Earth sent technology, food, people. It was supposed to be symbiotic, a partnership. But Earth kept treating the colonies like children, Jiwoo explained. Like possessions. They made laws the colonists had to follow. They controlled trade routes. They taxed everything. The colonists had no vote, no representation, no say in their own future. They were building worlds with their sweat and blood, but Earth claimed ownership. Krelvath's mandibles clicked. This sounds familiar. Colonial rebellion is common in galactic history. It's common in human history too, Jiwoo agreed. We never learn. In 2156, Mars declared independence. 3 million colonists said they were done following Earth's rules. They formed their own government. Earth responded with economic sanctions, cutting off supply ships. Mars responded by refusing to ship resources back. The other colonies had to choose sides. Most of the outer colonies sided with Mars, Jiwoo said. The Belt Stations, Titan Base, the Jupiter moons. They were tired of Earth's control too. But some stayed loyal to Earth. Europa Station, some asteroid bases, the inner colonies. Families split. Friends became enemies. The solar system divided into 2 camps. The war started with small incidents. A supply ship refused entry to Mars orbit. A mining station cut communication with Earth. Harsh words became threats. Threats became actions. The first battle happened at Deimos Station, Jiwoo said, pointing to a coordinate etched into the blade. A Mars defense ship fired on an Earth cruiser that violated their space. 17 people died. That's all it took. After that, everyone started shooting. Taeyang was 23 years old when the war began. He joined the Mars Colonial Defense Force because his home was threatened. He was assigned to the 7th Marine Company, specializing in boarding actions. Fighting inside ships and stations where weapons that could puncture hulls meant everyone died. They gave him a plasma rifle and 2 weeks of training, Jiwoo said. Then they put him in a sealed combat suit and told him to board enemy vessels. The goal was to capture ships intact when possible. That meant close quarters combat. Hand to hand. Blade work. Taeyang requested permission to carry his grandfather's knife. The commanders thought he was crazy. Why carry an ancient blade when he had a plasma rifle? But they let him. It became his trademark. Marines started calling him Blade instead of his name. This first name here, Jiwoo pointed to an engraving. Hyan-ki, his squad mate. They trained together, deployed together. Hyan-ki died in the first boarding action. A breach in his suit. He suffocated before they could seal it. The war escalated quickly. Ships clashed in the space between worlds. Missiles streaked through vacuum. Laser batteries carved through hulls. Stations were destroyed, vaporized by nuclear warheads. Thousands died in single battles. Taeyang fought at Olympus Mons, Jiwoo said, tracing the inscription. Earth forces landed troops on Mars itself, trying to take the capital city. The battle lasted 11 months. Fighting in the tunnels beneath the city, in the thin atmosphere outside, in the domes themselves where one stray shot could kill everyone. 300,000 soldiers fought there. 60,000 survived. She described battles in zero gravity where blood floated in spheres and corpses tumbled forever. Fights on asteroids where a good push could send your enemy drifting into space. The siege of Titan Station, where both sides ran out of ammunition and resorted to improvised weapons. Each name on this blade is someone from his squad, Jiwoo said quietly. 23 names. He served with different people over the years, but these were his core team. The ones who survived more than a year. The ones who became family. Krelvath studied the names. They all died. Everyone except Taeyang. Jiwoo's finger moved from name to name. Minho, killed when his ship was destroyed at the Battle of Ceres. Maora died from radiation exposure after a reactor breach. A1 captured and executed by Earth forces. On and on. 23 names. 23 friends. 23 pieces of his soul. The knife told stories beyond names. Kill marks etched in clusters. Taeyang was honest about what he had done. 217 marks for 217 people killed in close combat. Faces he saw as he drove the blade home. People who had families, dreams, fears. People who became enemies because politicians said they were. He used this knife in boarding actions, Jiwoo explained. When you're fighting inside a ship, you can't use explosives or heavy weapons. One wrong shot and everyone dies. So you use blades. You fight in corridors barely wide enough for 2 people. You fight in darkness when power fails. You fight in zero gravity where there's no up or down. She described how the molecular edge coating made the blade deadly. It could cut through hull plating if swung hard enough. It could pierce combat suits. Taeyang became known for his blade work. Earth Marines learned to fear him, but Jiwoo pointed to other marks between the kills. Small symbols carefully engraved. After the war ended, Taeyang went back and added these. Regret markers. 1 for every person he killed. He wanted to remember they weren't just enemies. They were people. They had names he would never know. Families who mourned them. The Solar Civil War lasted 8 brutal years. Earth's industrial capacity versus the colony's desperation and knowledge of their own territory. Neither side could win a decisive victory. They just kept bleeding each other. By the final year, both sides were exhausted, Jiwoo said. Earth had lost a generation of young people. The colonies were running out of supplies. Mars had been bombarded so many times that parts of it glowed with radiation. The belt stations were ruins. Everyone was tired of dying. A ceasefire came not from victory, but from mutual exhaustion. Both governments collapsed. New leaders who had lost children to the war took power. They negotiated peace because there was nothing left worth fighting for. 9 billion humans at the start of the war, Jiwoo said. 7.5 billion at the end. Not as bad as the resource wars, but still catastrophic. We did it again. We nearly destroyed ourselves again. Krelveth's voice was quiet. How did Taeyang survive when all his companions died? Luck, Jiwoo said. Skill. Stubbornness. He refused to die because dying meant they all died for nothing. He carried their names on this blade so someone would remember them. After the war, he spent years trying to contact their families, telling them how their loved ones died, telling them they mattered. She held up the knife, letting the station lights reflect off the marks. Taeyang gave this knife to my grandfather with the same instruction Do-hyun gave him. Never forget. Never forget the cost of war. Never forget that we're capable of destroying ourselves. Never forget that peace requires work, sacrifice, compromise. And then came your war, Krelveth said. Looking at the third section of marks, Jiwoo nodded slowly. Yes, my war. The war that brought humanity to your coalition. The war that taught us we weren't alone in the universe. And that some things in the darkness are worse than anything we could do to ourselves. She touched the newest marks, still sharp and clear. Would you like to hear about the Vrim? The instructor's entire body stiffened. Yes, tell me how humans fought the swarm. Krelvath stood before Jiwoo, all forearms held in a posture that his species used to show deep respect. His compound eyes reflected the holographic display of the blade, still magnified above them. Thousands of marks, hundreds of names, 3 wars etched in metal. I asked if you understood why I carry this weapon. Jiwoo said. Do you really? The instructor's mandibles clicked slowly. He had taught combat for 30 years. He had studied warrior cultures from across the galaxy. He had trained thousands of students in arts that were mostly ceremonial now. 300 years of peace had made his profession into theater. Before today, Kralva said carefully, I would have said yes. I would have explained about ancestral weapons, cultural heritage, the importance of honoring those who came before. But those would have been hollow words. Academic understanding without real comprehension. He gestured toward the blade. Now I see something different, something that frightens me. Ji Wu tilted her head. What frightens you? That blade is not a symbol, Kralva said. It is a witness. It has seen your species reduced to the edge of extinction 3 times. It has drunk the blood of humans and aliens. It has been broken and reforged. It carries the weight of billions of deaths. He paused. And you still carry it. Your family still carries it. Despite everything it represents, despite all the horror and pain, you refuse to let it go. Would you let it go? Ji Wu asked quietly. Kralva didn't answer immediately. He looked around the empty weapons hall. The walls were decorated with ceremonial arms from a dozen species. Beautiful weapons that hadn't seen real combat in centuries. His own people's ancestral plasma-edged sides hung in a place of honor. They were symbols of a warrior past, carefully maintained but ultimately meaningless. My species fought our last war 4,000 years ago, he finally said. We unified our world, joined the coalition, and never faced extinction. The weapons we carry are memories of ancestors we never knew. Stories passed down until they became legends. Pretty stories about honor and glory. He looked at Ji Wu. Your weapon tells different stories. Ugly stories. True stories. Ji Wu nodded slowly. She rewrapped the knife in its cloth, her movements practiced and careful. Every species in the coalition has been at peace for so long that you've forgotten what war actually means. You train with weapons, yes. You maintain warrior traditions. But it's performance. Theater. You've never had to fight for your existence. That is not entirely true, Kralva protested. Many of our species fought great wars before joining the coalition. How long ago? Ji Wu asked. 1,000 years? 5,000? 10,000? How many generations removed are you from the last person in your family who actually killed someone? Krelvath's mandible stilled. 800 generations from my species. My great-great-grandfather killed people. My great-grandfather killed people. I have killed people. Ji Wu's voice was flat. 3 generations. 140 years. That's how long it's been since my family line fought for survival. The memories aren't distant legends. They're fresh wounds. She stood and walked to the window overlooking the station. Beyond the glass, ships from dozens of worlds docked and departed. The coalition was vast, peaceful, prosperous. A civilization that had conquered the challenges of existence. Do you know what the other students see when they look at me? Ji Wu asked. They see a primitive. A young species barely out of its cradle. They're polite about it, but I can tell. We don't have the ancient wisdom of the Draxians. We don't have the psionic abilities of the Quellans. We don't have the natural armor of the Mantics. We're soft, small, weak creatures who barely understand the technology we use. Kralva started to object, but she continued. And they're right, Ji Wu said. We are primitive. We're new to the stars. We're still learning. But we have something they don't have. Something that 300 years of peace has cost them. What is that? Ji Wu turned to face him. We remember how to fight when everything is lost. We remember how to keep going when survival seems impossible. We remember that extinction is always one mistake away. She walked back to the center of the platform. The Vryn swarm returned after 8,000 years. Your coalition's greatest enemy. The nightmare that almost destroyed the galaxy. And what happened? You sent your fleets. You used your superior technology. You expected to win quickly, because you always win. Krelva's translator made a sound like static. We did win, eventually. After 6 years of fighting, Ji Woo said. 6 years to defeat an enemy you outnumbered and outgunned. You want to know why it took so long? Because your warriors had forgotten how to fight a real war. They knew formations and tactics and honor. They didn't know desperation. They didn't know what to do when their ships were destroyed and their weapons failed, and they were alone in the dark with monsters trying to kill them. She held up the wrapped blade. Humans knew. We had done it before. 3 times. We knew how to fight with broken weapons in ruined cities. We knew how to keep going when hope was gone. We knew how to survive. Krelva sank onto his bench. You are saying the coalition has grown soft. I'm saying you've forgotten the cost of peace, Ji Woo corrected. You've forgotten that safety requires sacrifice. You've forgotten that the universe doesn't care about honor or ceremony or tradition. When something like the Vrin comes, all that matters is whether you can survive one more day. She approached the instructor. That's what this blade teaches. Not honor. Not glory. Survival. My great-great-grandfather scratched marks in it while eating rats in a bunker. My great-grandfather etched names of friends who died in space. I added my kills while fighting biomechanical nightmares. Each generation added their scars. And what lesson do you teach the next generation? Krelvath asked. Ji Woo was quiet for a moment. That peace is fragile. That survival isn't guaranteed. That sometimes the only thing standing between civilization and extinction is someone who refuses to give up. Even when giving up would be easier. Even when continuing means carrying the weight of everyone who died so you could live. She unwrapped the blade one more time, holding it so the light caught the marks. When I have children, if I have children, I'll give them this knife. I'll tell them about Dohyun surviving the resource wars, about Taeyang surviving the solar civil war, about me surviving the Vren. I'll tell them these stories not to glorify war, but to remember what it costs. And if there's another war, Krelvath asked quietly, then they'll add their marks to the blade, Ji Woo said. And they'll survive. Because that's what humans do. We survive. Krelvath stood, making a decision. I am recommending you for the Special Operations Vanguard, the Coalition's Emergency Response Force. We face threats from beyond the rim. Pirates, slavers, remnants of the Vrin that might return. We need warriors who understand what you understand. Ji Woo looked surprised. I'm just a recruit. I haven't finished basic training. You finished your training in a war that should have killed you, Krelvath said. The rest of us are playing at being warriors. You are one. There is a difference. He walked to the wall and took down one of his species' ceremonial sais. The weapon was beautiful, the blade etched with prayers and poems. It had been in his family for 4,000 years. It had never tasted blood. I have carried this weapon with pride, he said. I have trained students to respect such weapons, to understand their cultural significance. But now, standing next to your blade, I realize mine is empty. Beautiful, but empty. It carries no real weight. Ji Woo shook her head. Your weapon carries hope. It represents 4,000 years without war. 4,000 years where your people didn't need to fight for survival. That's not empty. That's an achievement. Perhaps, Krelvath said. But hope alone will not stop the next threat. When the darkness comes again, and it always comes, the coalition will need warriors who carry both. Hope for peace and readiness for war. Memory of cost and willingness to pay it. He looked at Ji Woo. The coalition will need humans. Not because you are the strongest or the smartest, but because you remember. Ji Woo wrapped her blade again and secured it to her belt. My great-great-grandfather survived by refusing to die. My great-grandfather survived by remembering his fallen friends. I survived by accepting that I had already lost everything. We don't win wars because we're better. We win because we don't know how to quit. She moved toward the door, then stopped. Instructor, can I ask you something? Yes. When you look at this blade, what do you see? Krelvath considered the question carefully. I see a record of humanity's failures. 3 times you nearly destroyed yourselves. 3 times you brought yourselves to the edge of extinction. Any rational species would learn from such mistakes. And I see proof that learning isn't always about changing, he said slowly. Sometimes learning is about accepting what you are. Humans are violent, stubborn, self-destructive creatures who refuse to accept defeat. Those traits nearly killed you 3 times. Those same traits saved you 3 times. You are what you are. Ji Woo smiled slightly. It was not a happy smile. We are what we are. And the galaxy is safer because of it, whether the galaxy wants to admit it or not. She left the weapons hall, her small form disappearing into the corridor. Krelvath stood, alone with his beautiful, bloodless ceremonial weapon. Ji Woo's hands tightened on the knife. The newest section of marks gleamed under the lights. Unlike the older etchings, these were sharp enough to feel with her fingertips. Fresh wounds on metal, just like the memories were fresh wounds in her mind. The war started on my 14th birthday, she said. Her voice stayed steady, but Krelvath noticed her knuckles turning white. March 9th, 2197. I was on Mars with my parents. We were celebrating at a restaurant with a view of the terraformed canyons. The sky was still red, but we had made it breathable. 40 years of work. She paused, staring at something only she could see. Then the sky turned black. Krelvath leaned forward. Every species in the coalition knew about the Vryn swarm. They were the nightmare that haunted galactic history. 8,000 years ago, they've swept across the galaxy like a plague. Biomechanical horrors that consumed everything, turning planets into organic factories for their hive mind. First contact, Ji Woo continued. Except we didn't know what we were seeing. The sensors showed massive objects entering the solar system. Hundreds of them. Ship-sized at first, then we realized they were city-sized. Then planet-sized. They moved wrong, organic, pulsing, alive. The Vryn didn't broadcast warnings or make demands. They simply began harvesting. The first wave hit Mars. Bioships descended through the atmosphere, releasing smaller organisms. Creatures that walked on 6 legs with bodies covered in metallic carapace. Creatures that flew on bat-like wings dripping acid. Creatures that burrowed through the ground, dissolving rock and metal. The restaurant exploded, Ji Woo said flatly. Something the size of a bus smashed through the dome. I remember glass everywhere. People screaming. My father grabbed me. My mother grabbed him. We ran. Mars had 4 billion people by then. Half lived in the capital city of Olympus. When the Vryn attacked, there was nowhere to go. The domes that protected them became traps. The tunnels that connected the cities became hunting grounds. My father was a civil engineer. He knew the maintenance tunnels better than anyone. He led us underground, along with maybe 50 other people who followed. We went deep, below the habitation levels, below the life support, into the old mining shafts from when Mars was first settled. They survived the first day, then the second. On the 3rd day, they heard the screams from above. The Vryn were efficient. They captured humans and took them to processing centers. Ji Woo learned later what that meant. The Vryn consumed biological material, broke it down, studied it, incorporated useful traits into their own organisms. Humans were valuable to them, she said. We're adaptable. We can survive in different environments. They wanted our genetics. They would dissolve people alive extract DNA, use it to make themselves stronger. The group in the tunnels knew they couldn't hide forever. Food ran out. Water ran out. They had to scavenge. Jiwoo's father went with 3 others to find supplies. Only one came back, carrying her father's identification tag. He was taken, Jiwoo said simply, dragged into one of their bioships. I was 14 years old, alone with my mother in the darkness, listening to the Vryn dig through the rock, looking for us. Earth's military responded, but they were unprepared. Humanity had ships, weapons, soldiers. They had survived 2 extinction-level wars. They thought they could fight anything. We were wrong, Jiwoo said. The Vryn didn't fight like anything we'd encountered. They didn't follow tactics. They didn't retreat. They didn't negotiate. They just kept coming. Millions of organisms, coordinated by a hive mind we couldn't understand. Every time we killed one, 10 more took its place. Mars fell in 3 weeks. 4 billion people reduced to scattered survivors hiding in tunnels. Earth mobilized every ship, every weapon. They met the Vryn fleet beyond the moon. The Battle of Luna lasted 6 hours, Jiwoo said. Earth had 200 ships. Capital ships with nuclear missiles. Fighters with plasma cannons. The pride of humanity's fleet. The Vryn destroyed them all. Not 6 hours of fighting. 6 hours until every single ship was gone. With the fleet destroyed, the Vryn attacked Earth directly. They didn't want to destroy the planet. They wanted to harvest it. Billions of humans to process. An entire ecosystem to consume. My mother and I were evacuated off Mars on a refugee ship, Jiwoo said. We made it to Titan Base. Thousands of us crammed into stations meant for hundreds. We thought we were safe. Then the Vryn came to Titan 2. That's when Jiwoo joined the fight. She was 15 years old. The Colonial Defense Force was desperate for anyone who could hold a weapon. They took children, elderly, anyone. Training lasted 2 days. Here's a rifle, here's a knife. Here's how you seal a breach in your suit. My grandfather's knife. Jiwoo held it up. My mother gave it to me. She said I was carrying on the family tradition, surviving the impossible. I didn't want it. I wanted to be a normal teenager, worrying about school and friends. Instead, I was learning how to kill aliens that wanted to dissolve me. Our first combat was defending Titan Base against a Vryn assault. They came through the walls, through the floors, through the airlocks. Biomechanical nightmares that screamed without mouths. Jiwoo killed her first one with her rifle, the second with a grenade, the third with her grandfather's knife when her gun jammed. 347 marks, she said, pointing to the kill tallies on the blade. 347 individual Vryn organisms I killed personally over 6 years. Not counting ship weapons or explosives. Just me and this knife. She described boarding Vryn bioships, walking through corridors made of living tissue that pulsed around them, fighting creatures that had once been human, twisted and changed by Vryn processing. The hive mind trying to get inside her head, whispering promises of painless absorption. Every Vryn you fought was connected to the hive, Jiwoo explained. Kill one and the others learned from it. They adapted. We had to change tactics constantly. What worked yesterday got you killed today. The only advantage we had was that we didn't give up. The war went badly. Mars was lost. Earth's population dropped from 9 billion to 4 billion in 3 years. The outer colonies were overrun one by one. Humanity was losing, badly. Then my mother died, Jiwoo said. Her voice cracked for the first time. Not in battle. From an infection. Something simple. We had no medicine. The Vryn had destroyed our production facilities. She died because we couldn't treat a bacterial infection. Something we had cured centuries ago. Ji-woo was 16, alone, fighting a war humanity was losing. She added her mother's name to the blade, right next to her father's, right next to the 347 kill marks. I stopped being afraid after that, she said. Fear requires something to lose. I had already lost everything. So I fought. Not because I thought we'd win, because giving up would mean they died for nothing. Humanity's last functional fleet gathered at Jupiter. Maybe 60 ships. All that remained. They planned one final attack on the Vrin command ship. A suicide mission. If they were dying anyway, they'd take as many Vrin with them as possible. That's when you arrived, Ji-woo said, looking at Krulvath. The Coalition fleet. 2,000 ships dropping out of FTL. We thought we were hallucinating. Then you started firing on the Vrin. Then you opened communications. Asked if we needed assistance. Tears ran down Ji-woo's face now. We had sent a distress call into deep space years earlier. Never thought anyone would answer. Never thought anyone was out there. But you came. You saved us. Together, humanity and the Coalition drove the Vrin back. It took 3 more years of fighting, but they won. The swarm was pushed beyond the galactic rim once more. 9 billion humans before the war, Ji-woo whispered. 3 billion after. We did it again. Almost destroyed ourselves. Except this time, it wasn't our fault. This time, the universe tried to kill us. And we survived anyway. She wiped her eyes, looking at the blade covered in marks. 3 wars. 3 genocides. 3 times humanity should have gone extinct. And yet here I am, carrying this knife to the stars, telling you these stories, proving that we're too stubborn to die. Krulva stood slowly. I understand now why you carry that weapon. Do you? Ji-woo asked.